Hey, let's go over to the Cotton Bowl, guys, and take a look at that Ohio State-Texas matchup. And I think, just myself personally, these four teams that have made it thus far in the college football playoffs, I think we've got the strongest possible Final Four teams we could have asked for. Penn State, a little bit of an iffy thing, but you can't refute what Penn State's done this year. You can't refute what any of these football teams have done. Ohio State, Texas could well be a championship type matchup, if you will. Andy, what do you think happens between the Buckeyes and the Longhorns tomorrow?
Well, I sort of alluded to it before, where can Ohio State have a third straight dominating performance like we've seen so far? And can Texas play as sloppily on defense as they have in their first two games? I'm inclined to think that we'll get a better defensive effort out of Texas. They've been so good all year. They actually played decent defense in both games against Georgia earlier this year. When they lost in the championship game and then in the regular season game. The concern for Ohio State is we know they've got a great defense. Will the quarterback be able to get the same kind of play? Because you could make a case that maybe when at their best, or certainly playing their typical game, Texas may be the best defense that they will have seen this year. So when I look at the game, I look at the fact that I do like. Now, I don't know that it's going to matter that the game's being played in Dallas. Where you would expect to have a huge contingent of Texas fans for the tickets that are not allotted to either of the two teams. But Ohio State travels well, so I wouldn't be surprised if they had their hands on the click button as soon as those tickets went on sale to the public, and they got a lot of them as well. So I don't know that it'll be a factor, but certainly the site would tend to figure to benefit Texas more than the other team. The other thing I like about Texas is they've got two solid quarterback options should that need be. And perhaps, and if I'm Sarkisian, maybe I do exactly that I go with sort of an alternative game plan. Not necessarily on a series by series or a half basis, but have certain series, certain situations, yours gets in there and others Manning gets in there. And that, because if you've got to prepare for two really good quarterbacks, that means you're spending some time not preparing for the one quarterback that the other team is preparing for, and there could be certain situations in the game where that could come into play. The numbers statistically are fairly even. I don't give either team much of a decided edge in those areas. What I do think is Ohio State, and I'm rooting against Ohio State because I have the ticket on anyone but Ohio State and Georgia to win the national title. But when I take my heart out of it, I have to think Ohio State is the better team. I'm taking the 6 points. I wouldn't be surprised if the game comes down to I've got it. I think Victor said he likes the under. I do like the under significantly because of the two defenses. I wouldn't be surprised if the game is something like 23-20. I think the points come into play because both of these teams are so evenly matched in terms of talent and an accomplishment.
Let me ask you this, Jim. Has your guy mentioned anything or whispered anything to you about this Ohio State-Texas game as far as the side goes in the contest?
He bet Ohio State.
Ohio State, okay.
And I really wish I could give more narrative because he doesn't tell me why. He just tells me he bet, and he bets a lot. So you actually know him, Mark, but I can't mention his name.
Okay. Someday you'll share it with me.
I definitely will. Now, I have to ask this. My wife is from Cleveland.
Yes,
you
so
both,
am I.
Victor and Mark, are both from Cleveland. Are we allowed to like the other side?
Yeah, from a wallet standpoint, yes. Yes.
But if we
just not the Michigan game now.
Money, then oh boy, we're going to be in trouble.
You know what I find unique in this game, guys, is Ohio State is deeply, deeply talented. They recruit as well as any team in college football, especially now that Nick Saban's no longer at Alabama. But if there's any team in this playoff that recruits as well as Ohio State, it's Texas. And I almost fell off my chair when I came across this, and I shared it in our playoff guide, that over 90% of the players that are on the Texas roster are 4- and 5-star recruits. Over 90%. That's like unjust in a sense. Now, sometimes they don't play to the level of being a 4- or 5-star recruit, but the talent's at least there, and they go 2-3 deep. And like Andy mentions, even Manning being a quarterback, not even starting, and he's a 5-star recruit himself in that sense. Greg, what do you think happens in this?
Excuse me. One last thing to just keep for whatever emphasis you want to place on it. Texas was in the Final Four, well, the 4-team playoff last year, so they do have experience with a lot of that same roster. They lost, what was it, to Washington, I believe.
They've also got a quarterback in yours that was recruited by Ryan Day before he transferred out. So I don't know how much that plays into it, if it's a soap opera issue or not. But Ryan Day really, really reveres Ewers. He thinks he's a first-class gentleman and wishes him nothing but the best of success. But Ryan Day, if he brought him
except this week.
Yeah, except this week. Exactly. Greg, what do you think happens here, Ohio State, Texas, in this bowl game?
I think from everything we've seen with Ohio State this year, I think we see much of the same. The Michigan game clearly woke them up. We had no idea what to expect in that game. Nobody did. And immediately, from the very first possession, when they marched down the field and scored a touchdown, they have not looked back. I think the only way Ohio State loses this game is if Ohio State loses this game. If something happens like what happened in the Michigan game, if now all of a sudden the tide has turned and everybody's talking about how great they are again and they're buying into it again, I don't think that's going to happen because it fresh in their minds is what happened in the Michigan game. It's not the Ohio State fans won't let them forget it. So they know what's at stake. It's win the national championship or you guys suck. That's basically how the fans think in Ohio State after losing to Michigan again. So I think because of that, they have a goal that they're not going to let slip out. Which, remember, this was the most talented team in college football when the season began, not just because of the 5- and 4-star recruits that you also said, Mark, that Ohio State has and Texas has, but because of all the key transfers that they spent big money on, including the quarterback, the running back, and other players. And it's finally all coming to fruition. They are the best team in college football right now. They are going to win this game easy. They'll have a tough time against, I think, Penn State in the national championship game before beating them late. Probably a early fourth quarter game. But this is Ohio State's national championship to win now, and a team that couldn't stop Clemson when they had no running game, none. Everybody knew Clemson had to throw the football. Texas couldn't stop the passing game. Then Texas places Arizona State. They knew all you had to do is stop the running game. They have no passing game. Their number one receivers out. All you have to do is stop Arizona State's Cam Scatterbo. Couldn't do it. So now they're playing Ohio State, got a running game and a passing game. They're not going to stop either one. I think this game could be just like the Oregon game, and I think it could be over at halftime.
Who do you think has the coaching advantage in this game, if either?
I'm not sold on either guy. I think I would give it to Ryan Day just a little bit. Mark and I have talked a lot about Sarkisian over the years, and undoubtedly he's done a good job recently. Like you guys said, he made the playoffs last year, and that was a good step for him. And it was a close loss in the playoff game to Washington. They almost won that football game. They had a shot at the end. And he's got this team back to the semifinals again. And the one thing Sarkisian's doing right is what Mark said. He's recruiting. That's what you got to do as a college coach. If you keep all those 4- and 5-star kids from Texas at home, you're going to have a good team. Now you just have to make sure that you can coach in the big games. And I just like in that playoff game to Washington, I don't know if he's capable of doing that. So I think because of that, I don't think he's like a difference maker. And therefore, I just think Ohio State is just too good. It's not knock against Sarkisian or the Texas players. Keep in mind, a lot of the top Texas players that were on the team last year are not there. Xavier Worthy's gone to Kansas City. The tight end's gone to Carolina. The running back's gone to Carolina. So all those big guys, the guys that were the superstars on offense for them last year, are not there. They're still very talented. Don't get me wrong. But Ohio State's a lot more talented as far as experience and upper level guys.
Victor, let me ask you before we go over to the NFL playoff side of things here. As Jim mentioned, we're both from Cleveland. We have deep roots with the Ohio State Buckeyes in this contest here. And I would imagine we're going to probably be hoping Ohio State wins the football game. It doesn't matter which side we're betting. We're still hoping they're going to win the football game. What's your take on who wins this game?
We mentioned that we're leaning under in the game, Mark. One of the storylines, though, that I've have been following with great interest, particularly in the last few weeks, was the fact that you got this freshman on Ohio State that is really starting to open eyes, particularly in the postseason. And it reminds me of a college basketball player who 20, 22, 23 years ago kind of set the world on fire in the postseason. I'm talking about Carmelo Anthony and the Syracuse Orange and the unbelievable run they had again 20 years ago in the college basketball playoffs. And we're talking about Jeremiah Smith here, the freshman of Ohio State, the wide receiver of the Buckeyes, highly touted, if you will. Here's a guy, 103 yards on 6 catches and 2 touchdowns in the rout of the Tennessee Volunteers, 7 catches for 187 and 2 touchdowns against #1 Oregon Ducks. And if either of those 2 games hadn't gotten out of hand so early, perhaps that Jeremiah Smith would even have had greater stats. So that is the storyline, one of the storylines that I'm looking to watch on Friday night with the game, and also in his future with the Ohio State Buckeyes. But it sure reminds me a lot of what Carmelo Anthony did way back 20 years ago, what Jeremiah Smith is doing for the Buckeyes in their wide receiver room.
I thought you were going to refer to LeBron James. You know, they're both generational talents.
Yeah.
And to carry that story forward, when Smith played down here in South Florida, they had a following just like LeBron James had a following in high school. There were people that would go to his high school games and just in droves just to see him play. The same thing with this Smith kid.
Right.
Geno Smith's cousin. So, you know, they're deeply talented, and, you know, to Ohio State's credit, it's what they do. They bring all this talent in. And let me say this before we go over to the NFL playoffs here. Just a little sidebar note in passing. I was getting my hair cut the other day, and the kid who gets up out of the chair before me, my barber says to me, he said, wow, he really struck it big. I says, what's that? And he says, he was my neighbor here about 15 years ago, and he just played at Illinois as an offensive tackle, and his agent just got him a contract at Texas Tech. He just transferred out for $500,000. 500. The realization hit me right between the eyeballs.
I hope you left a nice tip.
Well, have you heard that the news is that Quinn Ewers is going to transfer and let Peyton Manning son Arch start next year, and instead of entering the NFL draft, he's about to sign a $10 million deal. Now, it hasn't been. Nobody knows where he's going. Some people think it could be North Carolina,
right?
With Belichick.
Yeah,
but
makes sense.
$10 million to play one more season of college football.
No.
Yeah.
Really?
What did Gabriel earn at Oregon? He was like a close to a $5 million quarterback, wasn't he?
He might have been, yeah. He was getting some pretty good money, so maybe it's not too much of a surprise. But yeah, they're throwing that money around now because they know that's what it's like. Oh, by the way, just keep this in mind, the weather. And I know they're playing indoors in Dallas, but there's a wintry mix going on right now in Dallas, and they're not used to that. Not Dallas. And so I only bring that up because the travel conditions could be really difficult. Now, it's better that it's a wintry mix, but there will be potential ice overnight. That could be an issue, but it's better than, say, a foot of snow because they're not, they don't have the proper equipment to move the snow there. They have like one snowstorm in Dallas, like every 10 years, 15 years. So just keep that in mind. That could be something where if you don't see like a full crowd in the audience tomorrow night, then you'll know why.
Because they got froze out, is what you're saying, basically.
Yeah, it's possible. Yes.
Right.